Well, is that a technical issue or is that a program issue? Probably a program issue. Well, we didn't have the budget. Is that a boardroom issue or right? So you see where that's going, right? So
Yep.
when you go back and you look at the things that actually happened and the root cause, there's almost always a program. There's almost always a
Welcome to the Business Ownership Podcast, brought to you by Awareness Strategies, helping you navigate the waters between entrepreneurship and ownership. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Medlock, and I am super glad that you're here with us today because I am here with my most amazing guest, Brian. Brian, thank you so much for being here today.
my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. So give us a highlight of who you are and what you do for business.
Wow, who am I? I've
You,
been
you
in,
can give me
my
the
name's
short name and not the
the short,
exponential. If
yeah,
you...
the short version. Okay, yeah, you don't want to go back as far as when the earth cooled, probably. Um, yeah, so my name's Bryant Tow. I'm Chief Security Officer for Leapfrog Services. They're a managed IT security provider out of Atlanta, Georgia. I came to them back last fall when they acquired a company called CyberRisk Solutions that I had been running for 7 years. Prior to that, I was Chief Security Officer for a Fortune 50 and have run professional services and been in the security business for, over 25 years and been in IT since the late 80s, if you can believe that. But yeah, been around a little bit.
Wow. So what intrigued you about security as a thing?
Yeah, so security was an interesting shift for me. So, like I said, I was in IT first, and by IT meaning I started building computers out of my bedroom when I was in college. There's a much longer story to that that gets more interesting with every beer. But I kind of took that into started a business doing that, and ended up doing a lot of business with the university. I went to Middle Tennessee State and sold that business off before I was old enough to drive a car, or before I was old enough to rent a car, I should say. And bounced around from various, master C&E, doing networking. And then as the wide area networks were coming up, I got involved with Cisco. I've had 4 or 5 books published on Cisco stuff by Cybex book publishers. Um, and I ended up on a project with a guy that would eventually become one of my dearest business partners, who was former NSA and a security guy. Um,
Wow.
so it turned out that in that time, the security people weren't necessarily IT, IP network people, right? They didn't have necessarily the same in-depth and background on how information, how packets move, like really down to the level that the network teams had. So it was really a nice marriage because my network teams didn't have the security, right? At that time, what was security? There was really no need for it because the threat opportunities hadn't really developed for the actors just yet.
Right.
So it became very intrinsically valuable to me that while it's very, very cool to nail things up and see them go fast, um, there was really an intrinsic value to me to protect them. And then taking the knowledge and the background I had on the network side and applying that into the security field. So Jeff and I started a security company called the Sargon Group that we eventually sold off to Nortel Networks. And I've been in security ever since. And that was just before the scare of the year 2000, I guess. So I've been doing it ever
Wow.
since then.
That is awesome and fun. And I could pick your brain for hours. But I promise I'll stick to the half hour. So,
Okay, well, that's fine.
so, so now who do you serve and support? Who is your ideal client?
Yeah, so like I said, the company that I had was CyberRisk Solutions, small boutique firm located in Nashville, Tennessee, where I still live. We were acquired by Leapfrog Services in Atlanta, who had been a partner of mine for better part of 3 years, and we ended up with several of their clients on our roster, and it just seemed to make sense for us to work together in a more holistic fashion, right? So they ended up acquiring us. And the reason why that was happening is kind of what I've built my entire security career around. Obviously, as I mentioned, I started off in the technical field, And the more work that I did, and the more I kind of, I'll say, moved, uh, I'll say up the ladder, if you will, into how we were handling security and so forth, moving more into, middle, and then finally into the executive suites and the boardrooms. It became very obvious, as I was doing that work with a lot of different companies, that security was stopping at the technical level. And if you do the root cause analysis on any of the headline breaches, really, that you've ever heard of, what you will find out is that the root cause actually started somewhere on the governance side. Patches were missed. Okay, great. Certainly a technical thing to not have patches on your systems. Um, but when you get down to the five whys, why were the patches missed? Well, we didn't have the resource. Well, is that a technical issue or is that a program issue? Probably a program issue. Well, we didn't have the budget. Is that a boardroom issue, or right? So you see where that's going, right? So when you go back and you look at the things that actually happened and the root cause, there's almost always a program. There's almost always a governance issue that caused that vulnerability to open up. That was eventually a technology hack. Um, so what CyberRisk did was we were pure play consulting, starting at the executive level and offering risk management strategy and executive leadership, virtual chief security officers, and that type of service. Building out incident response plans, building out policy, all the things that are needed programmatically to build a security program to properly protect the technical. So we didn't do any technical work. I mean, we maintain the strike force team that we still have now, to do penetration testing and that kind of work. But we didn't, configure firewalls. We didn't do Active Directory rules or anything like that. We had partners that would go in and do that technical stuff, or if the clients themselves had IT teams, and we would leverage them to do that work, and then we would be the governance side to manage and metric how all of those kind of things were being managed. So Leapfrog, being an IT services provider, they're the one that, as I like to say, they're the ones that manage the bits, bytes, and blinky lights. So we could manage the governance side of it from, VCSO, governance, and then the operation side, and then have Leapfrog doing the technical stuff. So then it became very obvious after we got 5 or 6 of those clients on both rosters that the holistic solution is really what the market is looking for. So it really kind of gives us a first mover advantage, if you will, to be able to talk to a client at the executive board level about risk, being able to build out a proper strategy over 2-3 years, whatever that throttle, as I call it, needs to be, and then also be able to operate the technology to the level and to the governance program that we put in place. So it's really working out very, very well for all of our clients that have bought into the service, that we can really provide what we call our ring of security, right? So when you do the 4 pillars, right? People, processes, technology, facilities, right? Nothing new about that. It's been around since the days of the transistors, right? But when you wrap the attack surface around that, and you really look at where these attacks are coming from, what MIT, Columbia, and several other studies have noticed and reported on, is what I started out the conversation with, was that most of those attacks, a little over half of them, come from the governance side. They affect the technology, but coming from that governance side, it's very important for us to work with our clients on making sure that entire ring is protected. So that's the whole thing that we do. Like I said, it provides us a very significant competitive advantage in that, because most IT providers that are managed providers, there's always that gray area between what they're providing, right? Is it a rack space power circuit? Are they coming as far in as the server? And if they are coming in as far as the server, who's actually managing The server, is the client responsible for patching? Is the provider responsible for patching? Or now you get from server itself into the operating system or into the databases, so forth, and those kind of things, and writing on the server, who's responsible for all of that. So having the ring of security in place through the whole offering gives our clients peace of mind that they can run their business with a very high level of confidence that those kind of things are being managed.
Nice. So it's I was going to say, so it's not just IT companies or SaaS companies that are needing what you do. It's any company that has a server internal. Am I right? Or
Yeah, so it ranges. It's all over the place, right? So, people ask me, what's your target vertical? And my response to that has always
business,
been, well, what's the adversary's target vertical?
right?
People, and then and you also get the question, well, we don't have anything necessarily that an attacker would want. And my response to that is, well, are you connected to the internet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a website?
Yeah, exactly. Well, do
Yeah.
you have bandwidth? Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. You have processing power somewhere? Sure. You have storage. Well, those are the three tools of the adversary. And now, in this day and age, with the ransomware being as rampant as it is, there's nobody on the planet that data is more valuable to you than it is to anybody else on the planet. So you will pay for it if it
Mhm.
is suddenly taken away, right? So there's certainly some opportunities there. Um, yeah, so it just really comes back to having a true holistic approach from the board level
Mhm.
and down. So if you ask a security person about a holistic approach, they'll say, "Yeah, we have a holistic approach because say business continuity, right? So when you ask that technical person, yeah, well, our systems are up to 5 nines. Yeah, we're good. We are rock solid. Okay, well, that's technology. That's technology. That's not business because the systems themselves are available. Does not necessarily mean that the cash register is still ringing, right? So, when you really get into doing big business continuity projects, say there's a global call center and you're outsourced in India, and there's a hurricane or something coming in, you have to move 300 call center agents from Chennai into Bangalore, about 300 miles, and you learn when you have to actually run that tabletop exercise that way, or in this case, we did live exercises. You learn I've got 5 or 6 empty seats. My call times are going up because we didn't have pet care. I've got people that couldn't make the trip because they didn't have somebody to watch their dogs. Meanwhile, my call center that I'm responsible for the business continuity for, um, I've got empty seats. My call times are going up, my satisfaction rates are going down, and subsequently my SLAs for that call center client are in jeopardy because of dogs.
Essentially. Yeah.
Right. So there's nothing technical about that solution, right? So I
Right.
use that story because well, mostly because it's true. But it really does shine a light into the dark corners when you're talking to people that say, well, it's real easy. The technical guys can go in and change the NX records and push those calls to Chennai in about 3 minutes, wait for it to propagate, right?
Mhm. Until they count.
Easy. Moving 300 people, having buses, having hotels, pet care, right? Having all those kind of things in place is business continuity. So it's those kind of things. That may be a bit of an extreme example, but it really does shine the light on the fact that when we're talking about business, we're talking about risk, we're talking about cyber as it relates to all that. It's not just the bit bytes and blinky lights, as I was saying.
Right. Well, and I don't think people realize that, technology doesn't sleep either. So if somebody's writing software that's waiting to hit and opportunity knocks, then, that's when it hits. It doesn't wait until 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And
Well, and most compromises, yes,
oh,
100%, exactly to that point. Uh, Most of the compromises that we end up dealing with when we get that incident response call from somebody, or generally from referrals. Um, we had one there in Atlanta that was several years ago, that the ransomware hit on Thursday night, going into Good Friday. All of the executives had gotten on planes that morning early to go to an island for an offsite retreat, strategic retreat. You don't think they knew that? Yeah.
Maybe.
So that had been in there. And what we discovered is
Wow.
that the compromise had actually been about 4 months prior. And they had been watching the network, waiting for that time for that ransomware to go off and basically encrypt all their systems. And I tell you, there is nothing more, nothing that makes all of this more real than when you walk into when you pull up in front of a building and there's an empty parking lot where there should be roughly 3,000 people at work at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, right? They're supposed to be at work. All of the IT systems down, the production lines are down, everything's down. There's no work that can be done because of those systems. And you pull up in an Uber, right, to try to help this company out, and the parking lot is completely empty.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Well, it is, and I won't say daily, but just it is just
It's
about
pretty much daily
a
because
daily
they don't sleep.
a
They
daily
won't.
occurrence.
That's
Yeah.
their full-time job is trying to attack.
Right.
So
So when you do right, so when we did on that particular example, when we do the root cause analysis, okay, all right, where systems had been encrypted, all of the nursing stations had been encrypted, customer check-ins had been encrypted for all of their doctors' offices all over the country. So there's no automated check-in. They were trying to do the best that they could with paper. Um, Surgeries canceled. I mean, go down the list, right? All of those kind of things were happening. So when we finally found the smoking gun, they had compromised the administrative credentials for the backup program, so they could get into the backups and delete all the backups first, to then begin to move laterally to get to the databases, HR systems, and all that to begin to encrypt everything else. The administrator backup password,
1, 2, 3,
Bluebird,
4.
all lowercase, Bluebird.
Oh my.
That password is compromisable in tenths of a second. Okay, so back to my first conversation. Is that a technical problem?
No.
No. Is it a
No.
policy problem? Maybe, maybe not. If the policies were there, if the policies are there and they were being audited, okay. But there should be controls in place for password complexity, two-factor authentication, that kind of thing, especially around backup systems and all that, right? So are you changing system passwords on a regular basis? Is there a password complexity requirement? Is there password read? I mean, basic basic cyber hygiene would have saved them. I believe the net number from that one was probably somewhere around 25 million in overall losses. So I don't know. Maybe don't use Bluebird for your password.
Yeah. Ouch. 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 Well, and
But
I
the root cause of that was not a technical failure. It's a human
right.
failure. It's a process failure. The backup admin was not a security person. They were not properly trained. They didn't really occur to them that could be an attack vector. So we're going to make it easy to log in, and it was his high school mascot.
Well, and I don't think people really realize how much security has changed because to your point earlier, once upon a time, you didn't really need security because there was no outside access. You had a
Well, there was
computer at
nothing
your
online
desk.
of
You had to
significant
run
value.
around with a little thing or big floppy to go and access other information. I mean, it was pretty safe. You knew if nobody touched that, it was the same as it was the last time you saw it. And that was only, well, I want to say only, it was only, it's called 40 years ago. I guess it seems like a lot, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
to me, it does. To me, it was yesterday. But
Well,
now,
there's no intrinsic value to whatever you had on that floppy disk,
yeah,
right? So chances are whatever it was there could probably be rebuilt in a reasonable period of time. And then as we become more and more dependent on systems and then using those systems more and more to do more sophisticated things, and then there's more data required for that. And now you have these very highly magnetic attractive systems that are being compromised, right?
Right. Because I know personally for me, two factor authentication drives me crazy when it's something that seems insignificant to me. But then to your point, if it compromises anything else, the whole system breaks down and you're
So
kind of
there
screwed.
was an interesting study, and I wish I could remember who it was so I could give them proper credit. But it was really, really compelling to me over this last holiday season. They reported, and I wish I could remember who it was, reported that in their survey, it was in the mid 60% of consumers, and this was the interesting part. It was 60% of consumers that when they were shopping online, if they got to the payment portion, right? So you put the stuff in the cart and then you move on to the payment. If they got to the payment portion and the payment did not have significant security, meaning a two-factor authentication, or they're looking for the padlock, on the secure transaction, which is a whole different conversation. But if the consumer did not feel that the transaction was going to be properly protected, they would dump the cart and they would leave. That's the first time that number has ever been that high. So what that translates into is that now for your online web presence, for your web shop and all of that, if you don't have proper security controls, that you're making that consumer feel safe, that their information is going to be safe with you, they won't buy from you. And that is a monumental culture shift into the culture's perspective on cyber security and information protection. That was really, really interesting to me. Just simply for the fact that most people are like, and I use the Target breach from years ago, right? So TJ Maxx stock, dipped a little bit. And everybody, oh well, TJ Maxx is done because they had millions of credit cards and all that kind of thing released. Well, in about 2 weeks, it came back because at the end of the day, people get their card numbers changed, and the credit card companies will cover the loss. So the mitigation for that's fairly minimal. And Target stock came back bigger and better than ever because at the end of the day, the consumer wants the best value for the best price. And the information security portion of that is negligible as to whether or not it's going to impact them. Of course, that was many, many years ago, but to have come so far now, that consumers are actually dumping their cart online if they don't feel like their information is properly protected. For me, that was just a huge turn in cultural perception of information protection.
Well, and so for small businesses, I'm assuming that they have their shopping carts. It's up to the shopping cart software company to figure all that stuff out, is it not?
It is, yeah, and yeah. So most of those things are outsourced, right, and rightfully so. When we go in and look at a company's profile, what their risk profiles might be, where the threats and so could be coming from, are they taking payments, and so forth. You got to be PCI compliant and all that. The first thing I want to do is reduce that scope that we call it, right? So get that. I don't want to see any of that data. I don't want to tokenize it. I don't want it at all. And if it costs me an extra, percentage point or something, or 2% or whatever the dollar value cost on it, that cost per transaction is a hell of a lot cheaper than it is for me to have a fully compliant PCI environment. So we let them worry about that, outsource that. I don't want to see it. Let it go that way and let somebody else do that. Now, fundamentally, what we have done is we have not relieved ourselves of that risk. What we have done is we've shifted that risk into a different column of risk called third party. So, you can ask somebody like Five Guys, right? Who got hit not too long ago. Five Guys was outsourcing their credit card stuff, and the credit card company that was handling their payments and transactions, they got hit because they got caught with their pants down with Paul. So, right. So Five Guys, their name is in the paper. right? Or it's going to show my age there. Does people do papers anymore? But their name's certainly in the headlines, right? But it was their credit card company that they had outsourced to that had dropped the ball. So where does that liability land, right? Because what we've done is we've taken that governance portion around payment processing and we've shifted that into a third party risk. So what companies need to be doing for those companies that they're outsourcing things to, whether it's cloud providers or they're providing this, right? All cloud means is just somebody else's computer, right? So what we want to ask them, do they have their SOC 2 certification? What are their security controls? Where are their servers, right? All the things that go along with, and they do their due diligence on the third party to make sure they're protecting your data properly. So we've fundamentally shifted the risk into something that's more manageable, certainly, but that does not relieve the risk just because you've outsourced it. So I've talked to many and many executives that think that because we've outsourced this risk, outsourced those payments, that we're no longer liable, and that is not true at all.
Well, and it's not even not liable; it's not accessible. It's like,
Yeah,
I'm you may not be liable for it, but if it affects your data and it affects your systems, then you have it's not even about accountability or responsibility. It's we need to do something about it to ensure that it's taken care of because we need it taken care of.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, we talk about taking payments, and you talk about different compliance targets, HIPAA, high tech, pick your alphabet soup for compliance targets. And when we're talking to small medium businesses, most of them don't have a compliance target. If they're taking credit card payments, they outsource that. So there's really not another compliance target until they go get their cyber insurance. And to operate a business that has any data at all without cyber insurance is a little like you know not only riding a motorcycle without a helmet, but maybe, I don't know. It would just be crazy. I mean, you have to have cyber insurance because everybody thinks, especially small business. We talked about, I don't have anything that somebody would want. Um, but that data that you're using to operate is more valuable to you, like I said, and ransomware and all that. So to get cyber insurance, insurance carriers are dropping everybody uh, because of the cost that's involved. So in order for them to keep you, I mean, they have become the new compliance, right? So they're sending you, we want to know, they used to say, do you have two-factor authentication? And it was a yes or no. Well, where is that two-factor? It's on our 0365, and we reauthorize our tokens once every 6 months. The answer was yes, but that's probably the dumbest thing that you could possibly do. And I can tell you that recently there was a company that lost $14 million because they wire transferred $14 million to a bank in Australia. Um, and the root cause there was a memory scrape from an application that somebody had downloaded onto a phone. Um, and the application took the token and all that. Remember, they replayed that back in and then got access, escalated to domain access, and took over and then created store and forward email addresses and so forth, so that when the capital request comes in and it has new wiring information on it, it looks legitimate. So the wiring information sent $14 million to a company or to a bank in Australia. So what's the root cause of that one? Laziness.
Well, is it laziness or is it like, how do you trust anyone? Because you're kind of going like, I would have thought if I
If
downloaded it
they
off the
had
Apple Store or
if they
the
had their two-factor and it was through
place.
if it was through Office 365, if they had their two-factor and it was set to 7 days, then those tokens would have been you would have a re-authentication request every 7 days.
Yep.
At 6 months, those guys had been in there for months and
Yeah,
able
6 months is a long time for a programmer.
yeah, and to establish what would be a new normal. So when that wire transfer went out, it seemed normal.
Oh, that hurts.
If they had okay, so is that a technical problem?
Nah,
No,
no.
It's a management problem. Management didn't want to deal with the hassle. We don't care. Doesn't matter. This is no. We're not doing this. I have to call or I have to get a text every time I want to do this or once every week. No, way too much trouble. Well, which is too much trouble? $14 million or having to hit your phone once a week.
Right? Wow. That is slightly terrifying. So
I deal with it. I deal with it every
do it
day. People
every
ask me
day.
how I
Well,
Yeah,
and
people
things
ask
are
me how I
speeding.
sleep at night being in the security business, and I say, I sleep just like a baby. I wake up screaming every 2 hours.
Because I would think that with everything speeding up and it being easier to program, it's easier to program today than it was 3 months ago. So now you have another added issue that programmers are getting more access to more information faster. So the threats become faster. Is 7 days actually enough anymore? And how do you keep up with the speed of the threats?
Well, you bring up an interesting point with the speed of things, and even over the past 6, 8 months, with the popularity of the user interface that has finally come to light on artificial intelligence, right? This Chat GPTs and OpenAI and these things, right? Um, and we are seeing, even though these AI engines, they do everything that they can to not allow their intelligence to be used to develop evil things. They can't keep up with it.
Well,
So
there's no way
when
they
you
could
need a
stop that because I mean, you can write a program just to keep a door open. That's not malice
but you
necessarily until you add something behind that.
Well, but what if you don't have to have the intelligence? What if it's artificial? What if you can just ask the question and have the artificial intelligence write it for you? And then
Right.
all you do is inject that code into whatever it is that you're doing. So when what you were mentioning, what you brought up about uh, uh, the speed of things being developed, now it's virtual. Now artificial intelligence. I mean, if you need a piece of code that does a particular thing for access control or some kind of a man in the middle or something like that, right? You can go to Chat GBT and get 90% of what you need in seconds.
Right.
You don't have to know anything about it. You just ask the question, it'll spit it out. So your
Wow.
barrier to entry, we used to call them script kiddies, right? Where
Yeah.
somebody that's trying to do penetration testing or trying to do, penetrate networks, you run a series of scripts that are publicly available on the dark web and all that, and see what hits. Most of those things have a fairly short shelf life, and that the vulnerabilities that they're going after, generally the patching cycle outruns their capability, right? So as long as if you're keeping things patched, those scripts generally will go stale before they become necessarily usable. Um, but if we have artificial intelligence that's creating these things as fast as the vulnerabilities are discovered, then you've got a very interesting dynamic to your patch cycle. So what we're seeing in the market is companies that are responsible for patching their systems, Microsoft and so forth, they're shifting their patching cadence a little bit differently, just to try to keep up with that type of a threat.
Wow. So to for the lay listener in this that's kind of freaking out right now, what are some of the things obviously enabling double authentication when a piece of software says, do you want to do this or not? To do it now, some
Yeah.
patience with it is one thing. What are some other things that, and having more difficult passwords? You mentioned that as another one. What are some of the other things that people can do to attempt
Yeah,
to
got you.
keep their
Yeah, got
information safe?
Right. So the now what, so to speak, right? So
Yeah.
okay, here's a bunch of scary stuff. What do we do? And I'm not going to give you the answer that most people that you talk to from security are going to give you. I'm going to give you a different answer, and it's going to go back to my initial conversation. I can give you a list of basic cyber hygiene stuff, like you mentioned, right? Password complexity, two-factor authentication everywhere when you can. Um, you know, at the end of the day, those are very tactical things that come in as part of an overall program, right?
Mm.
So to tell somebody to go on, if you imagine that ring of security that I was mentioning, if you tell somebody two or three things to do to protect a certain portion of that technology, I still left half of your attack surface wide open. So
Yeah,
that's not
tactics will
something that can
never
be.
out surprise or outstay strategy. So yes.
Well, exactly. And what we see so many times is, somebody listens to a podcast like this, or they read a magazine article or something that says, well, you need to have this type of a firewall and have these type of controls in it. So they go out and they buy that and they spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases on this protection, not realizing that, yeah, it's fancy and yeah, it does an amazing job of what it does, but in purchasing that technology, you covered about 3% of your attack surface because you didn't
Ouch.
look at your business impact analysis. You didn't look at, well, where are the actual keys to the kingdom?
Mhm.
What do I need to be protecting and how best do I protect that? Not just because this thing is fancy and it's a blinky light. Where do I get the most return for my security spend? And some people will talk to you about percentages of IT as part of their security spend and so forth. And I mean, you hear generic numbers like that. And I'll give you a good example. Imagine you're another true story. Imagine you're the CFO for a well, I hate the word fast food, quick serve restaurant, right? They hate that word fast food. And we've worked with a lot of like household names. Um, and we're talking about, we've talked before about business continuity, right? How do we keep the business up and running? So I'm going to tie all these things together for you to help answer that question. Okay, so you're going through the list, things that we need to protect, and you come down on the list to payroll. Okay, I'm the IT security guy, right? Payroll. That's a 10 out of a 10, right? Got to protect payroll. We don't want that being hacked because we can't pay people and all that kind of thing. And we want to, so we're going to spend $250,000 on this for redundant services and cloud-based, whatever backups and all that, right? So we have this program that we're going to put in place. And your CFO says, no. Okay, I'm interested. Why? Because I am a cash heavy business. My payroll variance is less than 2%. I can pay my staff cash out of the drawers for up to 2 weeks without any loss. So rather than me spend, right. So rather than me spend $300,000 in system redundancy, high availability, and all that for that payroll system, it's not necessary. Their contingency plan is to pay cash, and then they'll back those payroll checks and everything into the system after it comes back up. And I tell that story a lot because what it highlights is what we as security professionals see into the business as things that need to be done and things that need to be protected when the business has a different view of those very same things. It's like that meme that you've seen with the two kids that are on both sides and there's a six,
Mhm.
right? So this one's saying it's a six and this one's saying it's a nine. They're both right, but it's perspective. Um, so as security people, so when you ask me, what does the business need to be doing to protect itself? I'm going to say to you, not the, two-factor this and whatever. I'm going to say to you, know what your business risks are, have a business impact analysis, know what needs to be protected and what your potential spend would be to protect that. I mean, there have been many instances where we see, well, people spend more money to protect an asset than it's actually worth. How would you know that if you don't have a proper business impact analysis? So my answer as a chief security officer and the experience that I have is, yeah, I'm going to cover what you were saying for the two-factor and password complexity and all that. And basic cyber hygiene is a given. If you're
But as a
not doing
business,
basic
you
cyber,
gotta know what you're dealing with. And I think it comes back to kind of a the grade 4 answer is ask more questions than you think you need to, or before you start spending the money. And I think being able to kind of go and, do that work with you to figure out kind of what the bigger picture is, because you just, now I may be wrong. I'm not in security, but I'm thinking if your payroll gets hacked, doesn't that leave everybody vulnerable? Like your bank accounts, their
Sure.
personal information, their addresses, their everything.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yes, absolutely. And don't misinterpret availability with confidentiality. Right.
Fair
Those
enough.
are two different things. We weren't talking about not protecting payroll.
I,
We were talking about availability of the payroll system.
I,
Right. So protecting it behind proper firewalls and intrusion detection and all that, that's one area.
I,
Making it constantly available
oh.
is a different area of we'll call it security. Um, yeah. So it's not, you know what? And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that perspective never really occurred to me, that that could be misconstrued as not protecting payroll, and that's not the case. It's not that we're not protecting at all. As a matter of fact, that is a critical key, key to the systems, keys to the kingdom and so forth. So it's not that it isn't protected; it's very, very highly protected. Uh, but in the redundancy that would be put in place to make it available, is what we were talking about, right? So when you
Got
talk
it.
about the security triad, that's, and honestly, in my opinion, now outdated. There are several, but we talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That applies. That makes that a little bit easier to understand. That we're talking about availability of the asset, not necessarily the confidentiality of the asset. That's a
Got
good
it.
point, though. Yeah, that
You
was a
had me
good question.
terrified there for a second.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's an excellent perspective, and I love talking to the people that aren't necessarily security people, because their perspective on things gives me a different perspective on what they're seeing, and how their interpretation of, like, just like, you interpreted that as me not protecting payroll, and that wasn't the case. So that's actually a very good point.
Awesome. So I know our listeners are going to want more from you. How did they start that journey?
Real easy. Leapfrogservices.com is the website. I'm on my first name, last name. So Bryant.Tow at leapfrogservices.com is an email. And that's probably the easiest way. Or if you just Google Leapfrog Services, it'll pop up, and I'm on the website there under the codes they call us, right? Because we're Leapfrog. So the other executives.
Love it. So I'm going to ask you a completely arbitrary left field question now.
Those are my favorite.
At what point in life did you know that you're a special kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Wow, that is a fantastic question. Okay, well, I tell you what, I'm going to go back. So I told you I started building computers out of my bedroom when I was in college, and
Yeah.
I couldn't spell. I honestly, I don't think I could still spell entrepreneur. Um, so I didn't really know what that meant. But I'm going to answer that okay. So you said when I was probably 20.
All right.
Give or take. I was in school at Middle Tennessee State University. As I stated, I was working at Sam's Club, and their risk management, basic quote, selling computers, but basically wanted somebody that knew something about computers, and I had information systems 220, so that was me. So I was basically making sure people didn't steal them, and that turned into showing people about computers and teaching them about software, loading up software and doing demonstrations, and basically learned everything that, just because I'm that kind of person. um, I started a company. I went to the general manager. I went to the general manager and I said, you know what? People aren't buying computers out of here because it's a little bit like buying a number 10 can of beans. What do they do with it? It's a commodity type of. Don't even think I knew what the word commodity was at that time. But I said, if I had the capability to when people bought computers from Sam's to go out and work with them and get them set up. I mean, I was installing CD-ROM drives and sound cards right back then, and setting up basic accounting software and and upgrading hard drives and stuff like that. And we went from I think we had 32 stores or so at that time, and we were in the low high 20s for Category 31 office equipment. And in about 3 months, we went to number one.
Nice.
Well, because people would come in just simply to talk to me about the computers, and people, when's he working? We want to come, and one of my favorite stories there. I don't know how much detail you want to get into, but this
Yeah.
this old farmer guy used to come in and talk to me all the time. Overalls, muddy boots, and had so many questions about computers, and I just absolutely loved it. He came in one day and had in his bib pouch a wad of cash, and he spent almost $5,000 buying computers for his farm and his I don't know, whatever he had. He had like 5 computers that he needed to put all across his farm. And I talked to him for months, and that really gave me a picture of you never know who's going to buy, right?
Right.
It's this farmer guy. He's just a great old guy. I mean, muddy all over him, and just whatever. And it came in, pulled out that wad of cash. Um, we got a new general manager in. I'll finish this up quickly, but we got a new general manager in that was not quite as we'll say aggressive as the one that had blessed me to go back and buy my beeper and to get a business card, right, to do my little business thing. Subsequently, they fired me because they thought what I was doing was a conflict of interest to the Walmart way. Um, I'll never forget it. It was a Monday night. I just bought a car. I was doing pretty well. And I went home, madder than hell, and watched the rest of Monday Night Football, and decided that next day that I was going to incorporate and start a business and actually make it official and start building my own computers. So we got our cases FCC Class B certified and sold. My last year in business, I did $250,000 with the university. Um, so So to realize, hey, you know what, wake up one day, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, was really more out of, somebody just drained all of the air out, and you're about to suffocate unless you do something. So I just decided I could build these computers as good as what I was selling, and I had a pretty decent little following at that time with several customers, and ran that for four almost 5 years before I got it sold off. Yeah.
That's awesome. What a great story. Thank you. Bryant, you have been absolutely awesome today. Thank you.
Oh,
Any
well,
last
thanks.
words for our peeps?
Last words. Gosh, I don't know. Basic cyber hygiene, I guess. Home from the top. Proper risk management and proper protection starts in the boardroom, starts at the president level. And if you think something is inconvenient and end up having to wire $14 million, well, your staff and everybody under you is going to be thinking that same way, right? So
You got a wider wallet than I do if that's your definition of inconvenient.
right.
So peeps, Bryant's links are all in the show notes. Of course, scroll down, connect with him, do the smart thing, because this is a massive case of you don't know what you don't know. And you just can't afford to be in that position at this point in business. So
Right.
Thank you so much for your time, Bryant. I appreciate it. And I know how valuable it is.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it very much. It was lots of fun.
Thanks. Peeps, this is Michelle Nedlock. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. We love helping entrepreneurs grow. Thank you for listening to our show. I'm all about being a resource center for entrepreneurs to give them the information and the support that they need to make it in business. As such, the notes for this show can be found at our website at awarenessstrategies.com/blog. Be sure to subscribe, give us a rating. I like 5 stars personally, and share with your friends.